Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Andrea Levenhill, and I am the VP of Marketing and Client Relations and newly today interim CEO at Committee for Children, which is a nonprofit based here in Seattle, but working globally to improve the lives of children through social emotional development. We're the largest provider of school-based social emotional learning programs. And I'm happy and honored to welcome you to the Communication Leadership Student Run Summer Event Series. Our topic tonight is virtual event planning. So before we get started, I have just a few announcements. We are recording tonight's conversation, and if you have the bandwidth, we actually would like you to turn on your camera. It's good to see faces. It keeps things a little more interactive. And we'll follow Mo and Evelyn's talk with an audience Q&A session. So please be sure to type any questions you have into the chat box. And our Zoom DJ, Stacy Stewart, will then collect those questions, and a portion of our time together will answer those. So let me start by introducing our speakers. Evelyn Kuo is a digital marketing specialist and a full-time student in the Master of Communications of Digital Media program, and has a lot of experience designing and leading virtual events. She frequently consults with clients on best practices for hosting digital gatherings, so she'll have a lot of good tips for you. Mo Herbert is a videographer, a storyteller, a musician, and has extensive knowledge and experience in shooting and editing videos. She provides that service for many well-known organizations and campaigns, and she's currently a full-time student studying communication and digital media, and also working on an album in her spare time. So Evelyn and Mo, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us tonight. Before we get started, I think you wanted to kick off with a short video, so I'll turn it over to you.
Does the COVID-19 pandemic have you or your organization struggling to connect? The University of Washington's Communication Leadership Program is here to help. We have assembled our COVID-19 consultancy to help nonprofits, small businesses, and on-campus departments. We can help you communicate within your organization and with your audience, pivot communication strategies in the face of COVID-19, create videos and other multimedia assets, and host online events. As community builders and communication professionals with expertise in digital technology, our graduate students and alumni are uniquely equipped for this moment. We're offering pro bono consulting, events, and professional connections. Whether you're a business owner, an employee, or simply looking to improve your communication strategies, we're here to help you. For more information and to schedule a consultation, visit bit.ly/UWCOVIDhelp.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our virtual event about planning virtual events. Basically, we're going to be discussing the stages of event planning, starting with what you would do before the event to sort of get it set up, what you would do during the event, and some of the technical details there, and then what you should do to follow up after the event. And as Andrea introduced me, my name is Mo. I'm originally from Westchester, New York. I studied film production at Emerson College in Boston. I also have a minor in music history, which is not necessarily relevant, but it's something that I'm super passionate about. I'm currently studying communication and digital media at the Communication Leadership graduate program here at the University of Washington. I'm also the multimedia tutor for the program, which is how I've been sort of helping out with a lot of their virtual events over the past several months. And I have a lot of experience shooting and editing videos, and that has sort of translated to, sort of figuring out how to incorporate those skills into these virtual events.
So hi, a little bit about me. My name is Evelyn. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I'm now also a graduate student studying at the ComLead program, focusing on digital media. I love advertising and food. Currently, I'm working at 2 jobs. I'm the event curator for the COVID-19 consultancy, and I'm also the marketing specialist at a small tech company. And like Mo mentioned earlier, I also participated in the Wear a Mask Walk campaign as well. So let's get started. Before the event, there are actually a lot of prep work that needs to be done. But first thing first, let's start with why. According to the writer Blair Parker, she said that when creating an event, we should always start with the question why. Knowing the purpose of your event matters more than any other planning phases. And so after knowing what the purpose of your event, we can start thinking of the topic you want to talk about and what content you want to provide in the event as well. So after having this idea can help you develop your event with a more organized way. So now we can start planning out our event structure. The first thing you might want to think about is your selling point. What makes you special and what makes you different from other organizations? Is there any specialty or skill set that you have in your organization? For example, if you're a nonprofit serving for the laborers in the Seattle area, then it might be great to have an event talking about the unemployment in the Washington state. So it might be more appealing to your audience compared to other organizations talking about the unemployment in general. In terms of the event frequency, if it's a single event, then that might be simpler. But if it's an event series, then you might need to think about how frequent you want to hold the event. Is it every week, every other week, or every month? Having this idea in mind can help you to develop a more consistent schedule and also help your audience to keep track of your upcoming events as well. As for the event videos that are presented in the event, there are two types of formats that you can decide. The first one is the pre-recorded video. The second one is live video. I would say both of them have their own pros and cons. For the pre-recorded video, the good thing is that you have more control of the content that you provide, but the bad thing is that there might be less interactions with the audience. In terms of the live video, the good thing is that you are more flexible with the content that you provide to your audience. Perhaps you can adjust it based on your audience reaction or the feedback during the event as well. But bad thing about having a live video is that there might be more disturbance. For example, your family members might suddenly show up on the screen. So I would say both of them have their own pros and cons, but just to decide it beforehand so that you will have more time to get prepared. Speaking of the event style, we might need to think about what vibes you want to provide to your audience. Is it a formal business webinar, or is it a happy hour for your community to check in with each other, or is it an interactive activity for your colleagues to build something together? Having this in mind can also help you to develop your event and also can help you to decide when and where you want to hold the event. So speaking of where to hold the event, there are several options for you to choose from, and my teammate Mo will talk more about it later. As for when you want to hold the event, you might need to think about your event style and your audience. In terms of the event style, if it's a business formal event, then it might be better to hold it on weekdays. If it's a happy social hour, then it might be better to hold it on Friday evening or weekends. And in terms of your audience, you might need to also think about where they are geographically. If your audience is mostly in Asia or Europe, you might need to design your event time based on which time zone they're actually in. So the last thing you want to think about when planning out your event structure is time length. I think normally for virtual events, it would be great to control it between 45 to 90 minutes, just to make sure that you have enough time to provide a certain amount of information, but it's also not too overwhelming for your audience. So because all of us now are working from home, and meaning we are staring at the screen for over 10 hours a day. So a lot of us are already very tired from having several Zoom calls a day. So just to be mindful of everyone's time and just to keep your event short and sweet. But if your event has to be over 2 hours, then it would be great to have sort of like a short break for your audience to take bathroom break or for them to stretch their bodies. So now we know the event structure, we can dive deeper into your details. So for your event description, I would say copy matters. And it doesn't just limit it to your grammar or word choice, but it also matters from your audience perspective. So when you're writing your description, you need to think about your audience. What do they want to know? What they're looking to learn from you, and what do they expect to get after the event. So when writing about your description, you might need to think about it as well. And after writing your copy, always ask someone else to proofread your copy. People make mistakes, and it's very common for us to have typos or grammar issues in your copy. So it's always great to have someone else to help you proofread your description too. Okay, that's moving on to registration. So if you have your registration on your website, then that's great. If you don't, that's totally fine too. There are a lot of options for you to choose from. For ComLead, we use Eventbrite as our ticketing platform for our audience to register for the event. So when you're using other platforms, keep in mind that you might need to also talk a little bit about your organization or mention a little bit on your event page so that your audience would know who is actually holding the event. And also don't forget to provide your event link on your own social channels and your website, just to make sure that your own platforms and the event page are both connected with each other. And the last thing you might want to do is the guideline and frequently asked questions. Is there anything they need to be aware of before the event? For example, should they dress formally? Should they turn on their camera? Or is there any work that need to be done before the event? Draft a short guideline or frequently asked question to help your audience to understand what they should be prepared or get ready for the event beforehand is very important. And if you don't have the time to write a short guideline or frequently asked question, that's totally fine too. Perhaps you can include like contact info on your event page for them to reach out to if they have any questions. Just to keep in mind that not everyone is tech savvy, not everyone knows how to register an online event, and not everyone knows how to log into a Zoom meeting. So by providing your contact info on the event page can make sure that your event is more accessible to your audience. Okay, so communicating well with everyone is very important in terms of the planning phase. When I say everyone, it literally means everyone. So from speakers, moderators, tech support, and definitely your audience. You have to let everyone know what your plan is and what they can expect from the event. So during the event, they will at least know what they should expect or what they should get prepared for the event. And also don't overlook the tech issues. There are Zoom bombings everywhere, and maybe your speakers or audience are not tech savvy, and these technical questions can be a bad impact on your event, and we definitely don't want that to happen, right? So having a tech support is definitely essential and helpful for your event. Normally, if your event is less than 30 people, then I would say having one tech support might be enough. But if it's over 50 people, then having 2 to 3 tech supports will be more ideal. And now we know what we want to talk about, what content we have, what structure we have in the registration page. The last thing you don't want to forget is to promote your event. Utilize all the platforms and tools you have to promote and advertise your event. Share it on social media, include it in your newsletter, and put it on your website. If you have the budget, it would be great to maybe use Google Ads or Facebook ads to help strengthen your promotion. But if you don't have it, that's totally fine too. At least you have other platforms to help increase the awareness, and perhaps more people will sign up for the event as well. And now Mo will talk more about what you should be aware of during the event.
Great. So the first thing you'll want to think about is sort of choosing your platform. We're obviously on Zoom right now, and this is really good for these sort of community-oriented events where you sort of know the audience that you're going to be bringing in. Like specifically in this situation, we're assuming the audience is ComLead students and people we've worked with, organizations we've worked with through the consultancy. If you're sort of trying to stream towards a larger, broader audience, you might want to go for one of the other live streaming services like Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Live, or Instagram Live. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend Instagram Live in most situations, just because it's a little bit less accessible, and you can only really stream from your phone, which gives you a bit less control over what you're doing. But I have seen that work really well for sort of like live concert performance events. And then the last one is a YouTube premiere, which is different from going live on YouTube, which is basically a pre-recorded video that gets premiered on YouTube live. So basically the event itself, or the video itself is not live, but everybody in the audience watches it at the same time and can comment on it live in real time. So in terms of using Zoom, the first step is scheduling a meeting, which you can do once you log into Zoom. Obviously, all of you must be at least somewhat familiar with Zoom since we're all on this platform right now. And then sharing your meeting invitation is really important. Once you schedule your meeting, you get this pretty long paragraph of text with all the options, like the link you can click or the number you can dial in. So sharing that is obviously very important to get people to come to your event. But obviously you don't want to make that too public to avoid Zoom bombing, which we'll get into in a bit. And the other thing is the feature where it connects to Google Calendar, which I've found to be really helpful just to get people to confirm that they're going to your event, and it sort of puts everybody on the same page and makes them less likely to sort of overlook your event. The next thing is recording your event, which we do at all of our COVID consultancy events so that we can publish it to YouTube later, and people who may have missed the event or want to go back and rewatch it have the ability to do so. And that's also super easy. You just have to be either a host or a co-host of the event. And then you basically just hit the record button at the bottom of your screen, and you can either record to the cloud or to your computer. And one suggestion just for doing that is the use of side-by-side mode if somebody is sharing their screen, which basically just makes it so that the video of the person who's talking isn't covering up anything in the slides. Another suggestion is just to think about whether or not you want to have your computer audio play back in a screen share. This is getting a little bit into sharing your screen, which obviously is something that would probably happen pretty frequently if you're doing a Zoom presentation. And yeah, basically that is, again, just an option at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, and then in terms of moderating the chat and the Q&A, that we tend to have people ask questions in the chat, and that's actually something that I'm going to prompt all of you to do now. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we will answer them at the end. What we found works really well is sort of having those questions throughout so we can gauge how many people are asking questions, and then we can sort of decide if we have a pretty small amount of questions, we'll call on people and have them unmute themselves and ask them. But if we have a ton of questions, we'll have our Zoom DJ who basically is there to sort of run the tech support aspect. We'll have them sort of read out the questions to keep the flow going at a faster pace. And then finally, talking about breakout rooms, this is a feature that you can actually only use if you are the host of the meeting. So if you're a co-host, you won't have this ability, which is definitely something to consider. But as the host of the meeting, you can put people into breakout rooms, and that's a really good way to promote networking in your event, because virtual events, obviously, we've all been staring at screens all day, and it's not necessarily, I don't know, you might not go into it thinking that it's going to be a really good opportunity to connect with people, but I've found that the breakout rooms really do let you have that intimate interaction. And then in terms of security and accessibility, Zoom bombing is a real threat. Luckily, we haven't experienced that with any of our events, but we do take some protocols to prevent that, one of which being the waiting room, which is a setting you can have in your Zoom meeting where basically people don't go straight into the meeting. They're first placed into a waiting room. You can see in the screenshot on the slide, and then we admit everybody. We actually have a guest list that guest list from the Eventbrite event, and that lets us sort of cross-reference the people who are coming into the event with the people who registered. So there's less of a chance of like some stranger Zoom bomber getting into the meeting. However, it doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes people don't have their real name as their Zoom name, which makes it kind of complicated. And obviously sometimes people attend who haven't actually registered for the event, but for the most part, it is really helpful in making sure the people who we admit are actually people that are supposed to be at this event. The next thing in preventing Zoom bombing is the host and co-host's ability to mute participants. So if somebody did happen to get into this meeting and was gonna Zoom bomb, it would be really helpful to have yourself as the host and then several other co-hosts who can kind of watch and try to mute and block these people, or mute and kick these people as soon as possible. And that's also just a helpful thing in general, because sometimes people accidentally unmute themselves, and having the ability to mute them is really helpful, just to not take away from the person who's actually giving the presentation. And finally, in terms of security, not publicly sharing your Zoom link, because when they're really publicly posted, that makes it, again, a lot easier for Zoom bombers to get in. And so a good idea for that is either sharing it within, say, like a Facebook event page that might be a little bit harder to find, or not posting the event until like an hour before the event starts, or emailing it out to the people who have registered. And then finally, in terms of accessibility, that's another setting that you can turn on. You can add closed captions into your Zoom meeting, and that's definitely something I would recommend, just to make sure it's accessible to everybody who's going to attend. Now onto lighting and audio for your webcam, which is something that you might not think about when you're about to join a meeting, but it is something that really affects how you present yourself. For example, I moved to this new house, and basically where I set up my desk, I'll take away my virtual background, and you can see I'm in my bedroom, and behind me there's a window, and I'm very much backlit by this window. So I ended up actually buying a light that I mounted. So without the light, I'm totally backlit. It looks horrible. Just basically, this light is the brightest thing in the room, the window behind me, and that's obviously not ideal. So I set up this lighting so that I'm no longer backlit. So that's definitely something to consider. Obviously, if you have the option, don't set up your webcam in a spot where you're going to be in front of a window, or basically you want the window to be, pointing towards you, not behind you. Another thing is to use headphones. Zoom actually does a pretty good job at canceling out duplicate noise, but just to make sure that there's no like weird echoing going on, I would definitely suggest wearing headphones. Consider investing in a quality mic, especially because we're probably going to be doing online events for a while. It is helpful, even if you just get like a USB like snowball mic. That's definitely going to be better than the default microphone in your computer. Another thing is like AirPods or other headphones typically have a microphone in them too. I found that the AirPod quality is pretty strong. And then again, I sort of touched on this already, but thinking critically about your background, you might not necessarily want to be in like a really messy space, or if you are in a space that doesn't have an ideal background, you can always just throw a virtual background on there. So now going on to the YouTube premiere, which is sort of a different style event. This is good for pre-recorded videos, or sort of videos that have a bit more of a production element to them that you might want to shoot and edit in advance, but you still want them to sort of be live. So we did this for our Screen Summit event, where basically it was basically a film festival. And so obviously we weren't gonna stream that on Zoom, because Zoom, like we could screen share, but it's gonna drop frames, and it's not really gonna show you the videos in their highest quality. So we decided to go for a YouTube premiere where we edited the video together, so that it would include all of the submissions, and then posted it as one long YouTube premiere. And in setting it as a YouTube premiere, basically you set the release date or the premiere date, and that'll be a specific date and time where people can log in and view this video. And that's the only time, or you can't view it until that time and date. It's a virtual event. And as it's premiering, you're able to comment in real time. And we found that this really, it did give that sense of community, even though we weren't like on Zoom and we couldn't see ourselves. It was really great to see people complimenting each other's work in real time. And then finally, some other additional tools that can help bring interactivity into your virtual event. Mural is the one that's pictured here. It's sort of a collaborative post-it brainstorming type thing. And it's just a great way for people to sort of reflect on what they might have just talked about in the event. Kahoot, we will actually be doing a Kahoot later, but it's sort of a fun little quiz game. Thought Exchange and Poll Everywhere are both ways to poll your audience. And then OBS is a bit different from the other ones. OBS is actually a streaming software that lets you, it has a lot of features in it, and you can stream from OBS to Twitch or YouTube or Facebook Live. And that's really helpful if you have multiple people sort of streaming into the same stream from different locations. You can do that seamlessly instead of having people sort of log off to switch who's on the stream.
Okay, yay. So now the event has concluded. What next? Actually, there are still a lot of things that we can do even after the event too. So the first thing that we want to do is to follow up with everyone to continue your communication with your audience. What we do at the COVID consultancy is that we write follow-up emails to our audience. So in the emails, we always include a post-event survey just to understand if our audience is satisfied with what we provided, and also to learn if there's any other feedback from them. And then we will also include a short event takeaway, so to sort of conclude what we talked about in the event for our audience. And we will always attach our event recording in our follow-up email too. And what I do normally is to also include a thank you message in my email, just to want to let everyone know that I truly appreciate everyone showing up. Because I understand at some point, sometimes attending a virtual event can be more exhausting than attending a live in-person event, because we have less interactions with the speaker and we are just listening passively to the presentations. So it might be more exhausting. So just to want to let my audience, speakers, and moderators know that I truly appreciate them spending the time showing up the event and even making the effort to participate in it. And the next thing you can do is to utilize your event as one of your resources. Perhaps you can make several short clips from the event recording you have and then distribute them to several platforms. And maybe you can also draft a short blog post talking about the topic that you've touched on during the event. And you can definitely also write a wrap-up post on social media just to let more people know that, hey, we have this event and maybe there are more events coming up as well. And definitely don't forget to include this on your website too. So here's what we do at the COVID consultancy. We always send out the post-event survey, like I mentioned earlier, just to understand if the audience is satisfied with the event they participated, and also to learn if they have any other feedback or suggestions. So from the surveys, we learned that a lot of people actually want to learn more about planning a virtual event. So yay, here we are today. And there are also a lot of people saying that they want to know more about marketing related knowledge. So we're also planning other events that are related to marketing in the summer too. So stay tuned. In the middle of the picture is our short event takeaway, just to sort of wrap up what we talked about in the event and also attach our video recording too. And then the last thing you don't want to miss is to promote your next event or upcoming events in your wrap-up emails or your social media. Surprisingly, every time after I send out this information in my follow-up email and after our social media team promoting the event on the social media, we always get more registration after this. So don't miss the chance and seize this opportunity to promote your upcoming events too. And another thing you can do after the event is to analyze the past events you held before. So this is the report I created for the event I held in the spring quarter. So just to understand my audience segment and where they saw the information and where they clicked the links, so that they can help me to improve and tailor my upcoming events to the audience that actually attended or registered the event. So just to get a sense of who actually is more interested in your event and where you should be focusing on more, like which platform can advertise more on about your events, etc. And yeah, and Mo.
Yeah, so some final thoughts are sort of not to think of your virtual events as a substitute for your in-person events. Think of them as something that can continue to be rewarding and continue to be used in tandem with your in-person events. This is just another skill that you can continue to use even after virtual events are the only type of events that we can do, because they really do sort of open up the accessibility in terms of, say, people who are not in the same time zone as you, or people who just can't make it to the in-person event for whatever reason. It does make it a lot easier for people to attend, and to attend globally. And this is also a good way to maintain your relationship with your community. So that's another reason that we both would suggest working really hard on your virtual events.
So here are some of the resources that we think will be helpful for you. And we will also send out these slides to you after the event so that you can check out the resources as well. And thank you.
Thank you.
Follow up is quiz time. So
we have a Kahoot, which is
yes.
one of the additional tools that we mentioned earlier. So if everybody could just go to kahoot.it. Oh, and Evelyn, yeah, I was just gonna say we need the game too.
I was switching it.
We might just want to turn the music down a little bit.
Okay.
I think you can do that from right there.
Hello, hello. Okay. We'll give it another 10 seconds and then we'll start a quiz. Okay, are you guys ready? I'm gonna start the quiz.
Good work, everybody.
Yeah, YouTube Premiere is very useful for the pre-recorded video that you want to share. So, okay, the next question. Oh, congrats. Whoa, Chai, Rini, Katie, Rihanna. Awesome.
This was some tricky wording, but yeah, you don't want your camera to face the window because then you're going to be backlit.
Wow. The next question. Which of these features can a Zoom co-host use? A little bit tricky, so only the breakout room function that the co-host can use. Other options that co-host has the ability to do that.
Yeah, so you have to be the host to start a breakout room.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next question. Ooh. Last two. What should you do after the event has ended? Awesome. So yeah, after the event, we should definitely follow up with everyone and promote your next event too. And our last question. It would be a great idea to hold your business webinar on Saturday night. Cool. yeah, it might be a great idea to hold your business webinar during weekdays, and it will be a great idea to have your happy hour on Saturday night. So that will be it. And thank you guys again for attending the presentation. And now will open some questions from the moderator and you guys.
So we did have a question. If you can go ahead and turn on your video. Let's see here. Go. There we go. Okay, ready.
Okay, hi everyone. Can we all hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Hello.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for this. Was a very it was highly enlightening for me. Thank you very much. I had two questions. First, I wanted to know what you would recommend as the number of co-hosts for an event of say over 100 people, and what platform you would recommend to host such an event.
Yeah, well, so that is a good point to bring up. So the maximum size of meetings on the free version of Zoom is 100 participants. They do have an option, a paid option. I'm actually not sure how much that option is to host larger meetings of up to 500 people. And in terms of that, if you were going that route, for co-hosts, yeah, in that case, I would say maybe around 10 co-hosts. It would definitely be very helpful to have several people on deck to sort of admit people into the meeting and just make sure nothing goes wrong on the tech end. So that's definitely an option. In terms of which platform, I think it also depends on what, like, sort of the goal of your meeting. Like if you do want people to actually be interacting with each other, then I do think the Zoom large meeting option would be a good plan, because you can, again, assign breakout rooms and people can have their webcams on and their microphones on and actually talk to each other. But if it's more of like a presentation style informative meeting, then I would probably suggest either like a YouTube live event, which is different from the premiere, but some sort of live streaming service as opposed to a Zoom meeting.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course, and I'm glad you found this helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Feel welcome to put any additional questions in the chat when you feel ready.
I have one while we're
Also,
waiting. Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, you
yeah,
go
for
ahead,
sure.
Mo.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I saw somebody had also asked, and I answered this in the chat, but somebody had asked if a YouTube premiere is free and also if breakout rooms are free. And yes, both of those are free options. Yeah, so anybody who has a Zoom account or a YouTube account is able to do both of those things for free.
Great. So while we're waiting for others to think of questions that might be helpful, I sort of sense that maybe some general categories of like things you should think about in choosing a platform might be helpful, like cost, if there are caps on the size, those kinds of, do you have kind of a list of tips? I thought the platform overview was good, but if you had some kind of like, how do I choose this based on the kind of event I'm doing that are just general categories that might be helpful for people?
Yeah, I actually wrote a short virtual event planning guide to talk about like which platform is more suitable for your purpose and how many people will be in the webinar. So I will definitely include that piece in our follow-up emails too, so you can check out which platform is more suitable for your event too. So for Zoom, it has like a Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar. So the difference is that Zoom webinar is definitely bigger, and there are also other webinar platforms or meeting platforms for you to choose from. But I would definitely include that in our follow-up emails for you to take a look. Feel free to ask any other questions, or if you have any experience you want to share, feel free to unmute yourself and share with us. So I will start my experience sharing them. So I actually started planning our virtual event in spring when I got into this COVID-19 consulting team. I had like a little bit experience in helping out Zoom meetings when I was working for the UW School of Nursing. But in terms of the overall event planning, I had no idea of how to do that. So I looked up some online resources and talked to my teammates and to have some logistics of how to plan a successful virtual event. And after several virtual events, you will have a sense of like the structure and logistics of planning an event. And I would say definitely attend more webinars as possible, just to understand what other people are doing and to maybe learn from other people if there's any good thing about that. So for like follow up or like for presentations, I always learn from other people to see if we can also improve for our events as well. So that's for my part. Mo, would you like to share something too?
Yeah, I actually, my Wi-Fi froze
Oh, oops.
when you were explaining that actually, which is
No worries.
ironically for sure when you're doing virtual events.
Yeah, that happens all the time too. Sometimes when I was having meetings with clients, my internet just went off and then I had to like reconnect and wait, and it was kind of awkward, and things happen and you just have to be prepared before the meeting for sure. And I saw a question from Vivian. She asked that, is there any specific tips for fundraising events or incorporating asking for donations for virtual events, especially if they are free for the public? Andrea, do you have any suggestions for that?
So I think earlier we talked about what makes an event worth paying for versus something that should be free. And so as far as fundraising, it's a really interesting question. So I think there's, if you think about successful in-person fundraising events, people know that's a possibility. So I would say you should make it clear that the purpose of the event is to raise money and use other channels and messaging to motivate people toward that, so that the people who join are already sort of primed and likely to donate versus something that might be seen as a bait and switch. So I would just say that's probably a trap you want to avoid. And then any sort of event that is considered a paid offering, which I would call a donation. So if the purpose of the event is I've given you really great content and therefore you can donate because you found this useful, then you want to make sure that you're delivering on that. There's so many free options around webinars, and so I think high degree of interactivity, follow-on pieces, things that can kind of extend their learning after your event, all of those, people find a lot of value in. So I would just take the time to think about, based on your audience, what's something that they would typically pay for, that you can generate for them and they can kind of get extended learning from, or extended good feelings for having donated. So I'm not sure if that totally answers the question of the type of event or type of fundraising you're doing, but those are some things that we think about.
That's great. Thank you. So I saw there's another question from Yvonne. She asked that if you're hosting a community conversation event, what's the optimal size to ensure everyone has an opportunity to talk? I can share a little bit about the community conversation event we had last month for Commonly client community. So at first we anticipated that might be around 30 people, and we thought it would be great to have breakout room functions for people to have more platform to talk and check in with each other. So initially we set up like several categories for them to choose from, but at the event we had 12 people showed up in total. So we decided to change our format during the event because there's no point of sending 2 people in just one breakout room. So we just decided to share the overall experience together in the main session, just to check in with each other. So I think if you have more than 20 or 10 to 20 people, then it might be great to start thinking of using breakout room functions for your community to check in with each other, maybe after the main session. But if you have like less than 10 or less than 20, then maybe staying in the main session would be a great idea for everyone to get to know each other. Mo or Andrea, do you have other suggestions too?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the exact same thing. Yeah, I would say like maybe like 15 to 20 people is the sweet spot for a virtual event where everybody has the opportunity to talk. And then after that, you probably want to start using breakout rooms just to make sure everybody has an opportunity to share their voice.
And I would just add to think about the logistics in that and what it does for your timing, because the more people in a breakout room, if you have conversation starters or things like that, you're going to have to think about what it's going to take for each one of them to do that. There's the time that you take to send them to the breakout room, the time it takes to maybe post a question to the breakout room, and then it will pull them back out of their conversation no matter where they are in that conversation when you're ready to pull them back. So I would recommend some practice runs around that.
Yeah, completely agreed with that. Actually, something that worked really well in our 502 class, actually, that we took last spring or this spring in this graduate program, something that worked really well was having sort of a long list of prompts for the breakout rooms, which again is something that you do have to put a lot of time into creating beforehand, but it was a really great way because we didn't have like discussion leaders or anything. We sort of had self-proclaimed discussion leaders, but everybody was thrown into random breakout groups, and the way that we really got that discussion rolling was going through the provided prompts.
So here's another question from Rini. She asks, do you recommend sharing an agenda of the event in advance so the audience knows what to expect of the session? Definitely. I think maybe you don't have to send out like the detailed agenda, but at least to let people know what will happen during the event. So what we do is to maybe in your copy or in your event description, let people know what you're going to do during the event. If you have different activities during the event, then what we do is to send out like a very short document agenda, just for everyone to check what they should expect during the event. That was a great question.
Yeah, great question. So we're coming up on our time, and it looks like maybe the questions are trailing off a bit. So I would like to make a few announcements if there's other questions that you have. First of all, I think you can stick around because I think Mo and Evelyn are going to also stick around and make sure that if you have questions that they can directly answer, they're here for you. And I first of all, before we head into that, want to thank the members of the ComLead COVID consultancy that so generously provided knowledge for us tonight and support. So Mo and Evelyn, thank you, and Stacy, thank you for your support. And thanks to the audience for being such incredible participants, being engaged. Following this event, they will be sending out a video capture, so you'll get that, as well as a short takeaway and a brief survey. So you saw that's good engagement post-virtual event. And then the next ComLead COVID consultancy event will be on July 31st. The title of that event is Digital Marketing, a Conversation Through Case Study. And if you attend that, you'll gain some insight into how to plan your social media strategy, how to create useful and engaging content for a variety of audiences, how to measure success, which is a very important part that some people forget following things like that, and then properly utilizing different platforms. So there'll be a registration link in the chat for that. If this kind of conversation is appealing to you, I highly recommend you consider pursuing a graduate degree if you're not already with ComLead. I did it, and it was one of the best things that I ever did. And you can visit the website to learn more about that. There'll be a link in the chat box for that as well. If you need pro bono communication consulting, this is an incredible offering, especially during these very challenging times. So connect with COVID Consulting.